For over 70 years, researchers around the world have tried to answer one question: what are these objects in our skies? In the United States, the first official investigations began with Project Sign, which initially took the phenomenon seriously, but that didn't last. It was quickly replaced by Project Grudge, where the goal shifted towards debunking and controlling public perception. Then came the most well-known effort, Project Blue Book. Thousands of reports, radar data, pilot encounters, and yet, many cases remain unexplained. In 1953, the Robertson panel concluded that UFOs themselves weren't the real threat. Public belief in them was. And by the late 1960s, the Condon Committee effectively closed the door on UFO research in mainstream science. But the phenomenon didn't stop, and neither did the investigations. France created GAPAN under its National Space Agency CNES, which is still active today. The UK Ministry of Defence quietly collected sightings for decades. Brazil launched Operation Prato after civilians reported physical injuries from aerial phenomena. Chile formed CEFA to study pilot encounters and air safety risk. But across all these programs, different countries, decades, and agendas, one pattern kept repeating. They were mostly studying UFOs as objects, and the data kept refusing to behave like one. Because alongside radar tracks and physical traces, there were also psychological effects, physiological reactions, and events that didn't fit into physics at all. In the midst of all these, one program in recent times particularly stood out: the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program, or AAWSAP, run by the Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, of the United States. This program existed between September 2008 and December 2010, managed by Dr. James Lakatsky and subcontracted to Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. According to Dr. James Lakatsky, from the outset, AAWSAP was committed to casting as wide a net as possible to study all phenomena within the overall framework of the UAP topic. If paranormal phenomena were known to co-locate and overlap temporally with UAP, AAWSAP would also study them. The philosophy of AAWSAP was to study all phenomena observed in relation to UAP. From its inception, the AAWSAP program aimed to maintain a broad scope of subjects for investigation, recognizing that prematurely narrowing the scope would result in a distorted dataset. The decision to research paranormal phenomena that co-occur with UAP, to examine the psychic effects in UAP witnesses, in addition to scrutinizing the core UAP technology itself, was not taken lightly due to the controversial nature of the UAP paranormal debate. AAWSAP adopted a 6-layer model for research based on a 2003 paper published by Dr. Jacques Vallée and Dr. Eric Davis. This paper was titled Incommensurability, Orthodoxy, and the Physics of High-Strangeness, a 6-layer model for anomalous phenomena. And it aims to bridge the gap between physical and consciousness-related aspects of UAP. It proposed a 6-layer model to analyze physical and high-strangeness events, arguing that these phenomena suggest new non-materialistic or interdimensional physical realities rather than just extraterrestrial spacecraft. According to the paper, modern UFO encounters look strikingly similar to historical accounts of angels, demons, fairies, religious apparitions, folkloric entities, different eras, different beliefs, but the same patterns. Witnesses across time reported physical or luminous objects, non-human entities, time distortions, altered states of consciousness, and often a sense of absurdity. Events that didn't behave logically, didn't follow consistent rules. The phenomenon is not merely strange, it is often deliberately absurd, theatrical, symbolic, or irrational from the perspective of a straightforward extraterrestrial visitation model. We can divide absurdity into several categories. 1. Absurd physical or flight behavior. Objects behave in ways that appear physically impossible. 2. Absurd entity behavior. The occupants or entities behave in bizarre ways that seemed unrelated to any logical mission. 3. Absurd symbolic or theatrical elements. Encounters contain dreamlike or archetypal imagery. 4. Absurd communication. Messages are often cryptic, contradictory, or demonstrably false. 5. Absurd environmental effects. Reality itself appears to become unstable around the event. The following are some examples of cases where absurdity seemed to be an element in the encounter. Case 1. The Socorro Landing, 1964. On April 24, 1964, New Mexico police officer Lonnie Zamora observed an egg-shaped craft landed in a gully near Socorro. Near the object were two small humanoid figures that quickly disappeared as the craft departed. What puzzled investigators was not merely the sighting itself, but the presence of a strange insignia emblazoned on the craft's exterior. If this was an advanced extraterrestrial vehicle, why display a symbol resembling a military marking or corporate logo? The object appeared technologically sophisticated, yet included a strangely theatrical detail that seemed designed to raise questions rather than answer them. Case 2. The Kelly Hopkinsville Encounter, 1955. In rural Kentucky, members of the Sutton family reported being besieged by small glowing entities that emerged from the darkness around their farmhouse. Witnesses fired repeatedly at the creatures, yet the entities appeared unaffected, floating away only to return moments later. They peered through windows, climbed onto roofs, and behaved more like mischievous folklore creatures than explorers from another planet. The encounter felt less like a scientific visitation and more like a bizarre performance, echoing centuries-old stories of goblins, elves, and fairies. Case 3. The Villas Boas Abduction, 1957. Brazilian farmer Antonio Villas Boas claimed he was taken aboard a craft by strange humanoids and subjected to a series of events that culminated in an encounter with a red-haired female entity. The beings communicated through gestures and sounds rather than language, and their actions appeared irrational and symbolic rather than scientific. Even among UFO researchers, the case stood out because the alleged behavior of the occupants seems strangely theatrical, emotional, and inconsistent with what one might expect from an advanced exploratory mission. Case 4. The Pascagoula Abduction, 1973. While fishing along the Pascagoula River in Mississippi, Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker reported being taken aboard a craft by floating entities with claw-like appendages and mechanical features. The beings appeared neither biological nor robotic, but something in between, Their appearance was so strange and unconventional that it defied traditional science fiction expectation, creating an encounter that felt more dreamlike than extraterrestrial. Case 5. The Miracle of Fátima, 1917. In Portugal, 3 children reported encounters with a luminous being that eventually became identified as the Virgin Mary. Tens of thousands later witnessed extraordinary aerial phenomenon during the famous miracle of the sun. Yet the entity's identity evolved over time, from an angelic presence to a radiant lady and finally a religious icon. The event seemed to adapt itself to the cultural and spiritual expectations of its witnesses, raising the possibility that the phenomenon was presenting symbolic imagery rather than objective reality. Case 6. The Ariel School Encounter, 1994. More than 60 school children in rural Zimbabwe reported observing a landed craft and non-human beings near their school playground. The most unusual aspect was not the sighting itself, but the claim that many children received telepathic messages warning about environmental destruction and humanity's relationship with technology. The choice of audience seemed profoundly strange. Why would an advanced intelligence communicate a global message through children in a remote rural school, rather than through scientists, governments, or world leaders? Case 7. The Contactee Era in the 1950s. During the 1950s, self-described contactees such as George Damsky claimed to meet benevolent visitors from Venus, Mars, and other planets. These space brothers delivered spiritual teachings, philosophical warnings, and visions of humanity's future. The problem was that advancing planetary science soon revealed these worlds to be completely inhospitable to human-like life. Yet the encounters continued to influence millions of people. Case 8. The Mothman Wave of 1966 to 1967. Around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, reports of a winged humanoid creature were accompanied by a flood of seemingly unrelated anomalies. Witnesses reported UFO sightings, mysterious men in black visits, prophetic dreams, electrical disturbances, strange phone calls, and poltergeist-like events. The absurdity lay in the fact that these phenomena appeared together in the same place and time. Instead of a single mystery, investigators encountered an entire ecosystem of anomalies overlapping one another. Case 9. Men in Black Encounters. Throughout UFO history, witnesses have reported visits from mysterious men dressed in black suits who appeared shortly after UFO sightings. What made these encounters so unsettling was the visitors' apparent inability to behave normally. They often spoke strangely, displayed little understanding of basic social interactions, and sometimes seemed unfamiliar with ordinary human customs. Witnesses frequently described the impressions that these individuals were attempting to imitate human behavior, but were somehow getting it wrong. Case 10. The Flatwoods Monster in 1952. Following the observation of a bright object descending from the sky in Braxton County, West Virginia, several witnesses encountered a towering figure with a glowing face and a distinctive spade-shaped head. The entity appeared to glide rather than walk and looked unlike any biological creature described before or since. Its appearance seemed almost symbolic, as though it had stepped directly from a nightmare or a piece of surreal artwork. The event remains one of the strangest examples of an encounter that defies easy classification. Case 11, Skinwalker Ranch. Investigations at Skinwalker Ranch, a 512-acre property in Utah's Uinta Basin, revealed a bewildering mixture of phenomena: UFOs, strange lights, apparitions, animal mutilations, poltergeist activity, psychological effects, and unexplained health issues. Researchers found that every attempt to isolate the phenomenon into a single category failed. It appeared to manifest as a physical object one moment, a psychological experience the next, and a paranormal event after that. For many investigators, Skinwalker Ranch became a modern demonstration of the very problem Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis were trying to solve, a phenomenon that seemed to operate simultaneously across multiple layers of reality. Here, UFOs, physical effects, psychological reactions, apparitions, poltergeist phenomena, and long-term cultural impacts appear together in the same environment. Instead of fitting neatly into one category, the phenomenon seems to move freely between categories. Most UFO cases can be categorized. A sighting is a sighting. A paranormal event is a paranormal event. A psychological experience is a psychological experience. Skinwalker Ranch refuses to stay inside those boundaries. The phenomenon appeared to react to investigators. Equipment would fail. Events seemed to occur when researchers were present. Some investigators even reported that the phenomena appeared to follow them home after leaving the ranch. This led AAWSAP researchers to adopt the term the hitchhiker effect. The idea that the phenomenon was not confined to a location. It appeared capable of transferring itself through human contact. Skinwalker Ranch is difficult to explain under any single hypothesis. If it was simply a spacecraft, it doesn't explain the apparitions. If it were a psychological phenomenon, it doesn't explain the instrumented observations. If it were a haunting, it doesn't explain the aerospace anomalies. The phenomenon appears to cross categories.
Contact between human percipients and the UFO phenomenon always occurs under conditions controlled by the latter. Its characteristic feature is a factor of absurdity that leads to a rejection of the story by the upper layers of the target society and an absorption at a deep unconscious level of the symbols conveyed by the encounter.
What fascinated Jacques Vallée was not merely that witnesses reported extraordinary things. It was that they reported things that seemed deliberately absurd. Objects behave like machines one moment and dreams the next. Entities delivered messages that were symbolic rather than informative. Encounters resembled religious visions, fairy folklore, science fiction, and psychological experiences. The phenomenon appeared to violate not only the laws of physics as we know it, but the rules of common sense itself. And it was this persistent absurdity appearing across centuries of reports that convinced Jacques Vallée and later Eric Davis that any serious framework would need to account for much more than physical objects in the sky. So instead of forcing the phenomenon into a single explanation, Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis asked a different question. What if the absurdity is the clue? They observed that every serious case includes more than just an object. It affects the environment, it affects the witness, it affects perception, and sometimes it affects belief systems. And this led to their central insight. The phenomenon cannot be understood through a single domain model, not physics alone, not psychology alone, not belief systems alone. It requires a multi-layered framework, one that includes the physical, the psychological, the physiological, and even the cultural, because that's what the data actually shows. In other words, the 6-layer model isn't a theory added on top of the phenomenon. It is a model forced by the data itself.
Layer 1, the physical. At the most basic level, UFOs are physical. They occupies a position in space, consistent with geometry, moves as time passes, interacts with the environment through thermal effects, exhibits light absorption and emission from which power output estimates can be derived, produces turbulence. When landed, leaves indentations and burns from which mass and energy figures can be derived, gives rise to photographic images, leaves material residue consistent with Earth chemistry, gives rise to electric, magnetic, and gravitational disturbances. This is why people say UFOs are real, because at this layer, they behave like technology. Layer 2, the anti-physical. The variables are the same as those in Layer 1, but they form patterns that conflict with those predicted by modern physics, such as sinking into the ground, shrinking in size, growing larger, or changing shape on the spot, becoming fuzzy and transparent, dividing into 2 or more objects, several of them merging into one object at slow speed, disappearing at one point and appearing elsewhere instantaneously, remaining observable visually while not detected by radar, producing missing time or time dilatation, producing topological inversion or space dilatation, for instance. Object was estimated to be of small exterior size Orvilleum, but witnesses saw a huge interior many times the exterior size, appearing as balls of colored, intensely bright light under intelligent control. Now we have something that appears physical, but behaves like it isn't. Layer 3, the psychological. Now the observer enters the equation. In many cases, different witnesses describe the same event in completely different ways. An example would be the Westall UFO incident. Hundreds of students and teachers saw an object descend, but descriptions varied: disc-shaped, metallic, luminous. Some dismissed it immediately. Others were deeply affected for years. The event wasn't just seen, it was interpreted, and that interpretation shaped the experience. Layer 4, the physiological. At closer range, the phenomenon affects the body. Sounds such as beeping, buzzing, humming, sharp/piercing whistling, swooshing/air rushing, loud/deafening roaring, sound of storm, etc. Vibrations, burns, partial paralysis, inability to move muscles, extreme heat or cold sensation, odors, powerful, sweet or strange fragrance, rotten eggs, sulfurous, pungent, musky, etc. Metallic taste, pricklings, temporary blindness when directly exposed to the object's light, nausea, bloody nose and or ears, severe headache, difficulty in breathing, loss of volition, severe drowsiness in the days following a close encounter. This is no longer observation. This is exposure. Layer 5, the psychic. This category involves a class of phenomenon commonly found in the literature of parapsychology. Impressions of communication without a direct sensory channel, poltergeist phenomena, motions and sounds without a specific cause, outside the observed presence of a UAP, levitation of the witness or of objects and animals in the vicinity, maneuvers of a UAP appearing to anticipate the witness thoughts, premonitory dreams or visions, personality changes promoting unusual abilities in the witness, healing. At this layer, the phenomenon doesn't just appear, it communicates. Layer 6, the cultural. This layer is concerned with society's reactions to the reports, the way in which secondary effects, such as hoaxes, fiction and science fiction imagery, scientific theories, cover-up or exposure, media censorship or publicity, sensationalism, etc., become generated, and the attitude of members of a given culture towards the concepts that UAP observations appear to challenge. In 1917, during the miracle of Fátima, tens of thousands of people witnessed a luminous object in the sky, erratic movement, radiant light. But how was it interpreted? As a religious miracle. Today, we might call it a UFO event. Back then, it became part of religion. Other examples of how the phenomenon influences culture are the prevailing belief in the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the Space Brothers movement in the 1950s, new religions or new interpretation of religion based on UFO lore, conspiracy theories, government distrust fueled by belief of cover-ups and disinformation.
So, across many UAP cases, we see a pattern: physical objects, impossible behavior, human perception, bodily effects, consciousness interaction, cultural impact. Not separate phenomena, but different layers of the same event. Now, here's the critical point. These layers are not separate. They appear to be one system. The paper states the phenomenon behaves as if it is a technology that integrates physical, psychic effects to influence human perception and culture. This is not just a vehicle, it's a system interacting with reality and consciousness simultaneously. Inside the US government's AAWSAP program, led by James Lacasky, investigators encountered the same pattern: physical craft, paranormal activity, psychological effects, environmental anomalies. So the conclusion: you cannot study UAP as a single domain problem. The 6-layer model becomes a minimum viable framework for investigation. Ignore one layer and your conclusions collapse. So the next time someone asks, are UFOs or UAP real? That's probably the wrong question. The real question is, what kind of phenomenon requires 6 layers of reality to even begin to understand it? Because according to Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis, and echoed by James Lacasky, until we adopt this model, we are not studying UAPs or UFOs. We are studying a shadow of the phenomenon.